What happens when the cheers of the world go silent, leaving only solitude behind? Seal once held the world's attention with chart-topping hits, a voice that commanded silence, and a love story many envied. But behind the fame and the smile, something darker always lingered. Why did he suddenly step away from the spotlight? What internal struggles was he facing while the cameras flashed and fans screamed his name? How did a man who once packed stadiums find himself in quiet isolation, haunted by things no one ever saw? What happened to Seal after the fame was unexpected, and it challenges everything you thought you knew about him? There was a time when Seal was followed by the roar of packed stadiums, his voice captivating audiences everywhere. He was a legend in his own right. But now, that once deafening sound has grown quiet. Seal has faced many harsh realities, and not just recently, his struggles began long before fame. His childhood and early years were shaped by painful experiences that would deeply influence the person and artist he became. Before the world heard his voice, Seal was just a boy navigating the harsh streets of London. Born in 1963 to Nigerian and Brazilian parents, Seal's early life was far from stable. His full name, Seal Henry Olusegun Olumide Adola Samuel, reflected a rich cultural heritage, but it offered little protection from the hardships of his youth. From the beginning, life pulled him in many directions. His parents, both young and struggling, were not consistent presences in his life. Money was scarce, and emotional security was even scarcer. Soon after his birth, Seal was placed in foster care, a decision that left deep emotional wounds long before any physical scars appeared. His early years were spent with a foster family in Paddington, London, in what seemed, for a time, to be a safe and calm environment, more stable than what his biological parents could offer. Yet, even in that relative safety, Seal felt a sense of otherness. The knowledge that he had been placed there by his parents clung to him, casting a long shadow over his sense of belonging. That feeling of disconnection stayed with him even as he grew older. At the age of 4, Seal returned to live with his biological parents, and life took a tougher turn. His mother, facing her own emotional and financial burdens, struggled to rebuild a bond with the son she had given up. Their relationship was strained from the outset. There was love, but it was often buried beneath tension, misunderstanding, and unmet emotional needs. His father, by contrast, was a stern and often harsh presence. Seal has spoken of a childhood marked more by survival than by comfort, a home life where discipline crossed the line into fear and emotional hardship. While other children freely chased dreams, Seal learned to brace for disappointment. The instability, loneliness, and longing for emotional safety not only shaped the boy he was, but also laid the foundation for the artist he would become. Even at the height of his fame, Seal continued to search for the love he never received from his parents. Speaking about his music, he once said, "People tell me they like my music. That is phenomenal. It's like the love that I always wanted from my parents, the love that I wanted my father to show me, the kind where he puts his arm around me and tells me, 'Seal, you did a great job.'" He never got that kind of affirmation from his father, not even at the end of his life. Seal's passion for music began when a primary school teacher encouraged him to sing, even having him perform in front of his parents at a school concert. From that moment, music became more than an interest, it was essential. It gave him a way to release emotions he couldn't express as a child, anger, sadness, and a deep longing to be accepted and loved without conditions. At school, he wasn't the loudest or most confident. He observed, listened, and internalized the emotions around him. That quiet sensitivity would later become one of his greatest strengths. You can hear that emotional depth in his music, the way his voice strains and cracks just enough to pull you into the heartbreak he's reliving. After years of instability and hardship, Seal didn't jump straight into music. He studied architecture for a while, a practical choice driven by survival, because dreams felt like a luxury. He took on odd jobs, doing whatever he could to get by. Still, music burned inside him, waiting for the right moment. He started singing in local clubs, backing smaller bands, and doing whatever it took to get on stage. Even in his early performances, when his voice was still raw, it had a unique pull. People didn't just hear him, they felt him. His sound stood apart from the light pop of the late 80s. It came from somewhere deeper, a place of pain, hope, and resilience. The real breakthrough came when he joined the British funk band Push. Touring with them gave him his first true glimpse of life as a musician. More than anything, leaving London changed everything for him. He journeyed across Asia, lived a rugged life, sang in dimly lit clubs tucked away in alleys, and slept wherever he could find space. Those rough experiences didn't just toughen him, they broadened his perspective. Every heartache, every anonymous night in a hotel, every indifferent audience became part of his being, eventually fueling his music. So, when Seal returned to England in the late 1980s, he was no longer just another aspiring artist. He had found something rare, a genuine voice forged by real life. In 1990, a twist of fate gave him his big break. He crossed paths with producer Adamski, who had just created a track called Killer. Seal added his vocals to the song, and things shifted instantly. Killer exploded. It wasn't merely a hit, it became a cultural moment. It soared to the top of the UK charts, introducing Seal's raw, soulful voice to millions. The track's success opened doors he once thought would remain shut forever. By 1991, Seal had released his self-titled debut album, produced by the iconic Trevor Horn. The record was an emotional battleground, a masterful blend of R&B, soul, rock, and electronic influences. Songs like Crazy captured chaotic beauty, while others exposed his deepest vulnerabilities. But what captivated people most was that Seal wasn't trying to conform. His sound, his appearance, his essence, all reflected the journey of someone who had endured more than most would ever know. And that honesty resonated worldwide. Seal's difficult early years, marked by abandonment and emotional turmoil, taught him survival. But they also gave him the ability to connect with others on an extraordinary level. Almost overnight, he became a global sensation. Awards poured in. His shows sold out. But behind the fame, beyond the powerful performances and thunderous applause, Seal was fighting a quieter, more personal battle, one that had begun long before his rise to fame. To the public, his voice had the power to shake arenas. But inside, he faced painful realities, most visibly represented by the scars on his face. His health struggles started in early adulthood when, at just 21, he was diagnosed with discoid lupus erythematosus, a chronic form of lupus. Unlike the systemic version that attacks internal organs, this type affects the skin, leaving inflamed, often permanent scars. For Seal, lupus left a mark that couldn't be hidden, etched deeply across his face. These scars eventually became part of his trademark look, but in the beginning, they were a source of pain and alienation. Growing up with such visible differences made life harder. Children could be especially cruel. He was met with constant stares and insensitive questions. Many didn't understand lupus or the toll it took, and instead of empathy, he received judgment and mockery, wounds that cut even deeper than the disease itself. Seal later confessed that his scarring made him feel different, and not in a way that felt empowering. It made him feel broken, ashamed, and unsure if anyone would ever look past his appearance and truly see him. But the struggle wasn't just emotional. Discoid lupus brought with it a host of physical issues. Fatigue clung to him relentlessly. Even at the height of his success, some days it was a struggle just to get out of bed. His joints would flare with pain, tightening his body and making everyday tasks feel overwhelming. For someone whose life became a cycle of performing, touring, and being in the spotlight, lupus was an unrelenting adversary. Exhaustion struck without warning. It didn't care about schedules or commitments. He had to push through interviews, shows, and travel while carrying a body that often seemed to betray him. Despite all this, Seal kept quiet. He never used his condition as an excuse. He didn't ask for sympathy. Instead, he channeled every bit of his pain, frustration, and struggle into his music. When he sang about love, pain, and redemption, he wasn't imagining it, he was reliving it. Every word, every note, carried the weight of lived experience. But even with all the suffering, Seal refused to let lupus define him. He once said that the illness taught him resilience. It forced him to confront early on the truth that perfection doesn't exist, and that real beauty, real strength, and real success come from enduring difficult trials. the scars he once wanted to hide became part of his identity. They made him unique, unforgettable, and eventually, a symbol of pride. Reflecting on it, he said, "Something that had kind of been initially traumatizing turned out to be something that has made me instantly recognizable. I quickly realized this body is not who we are. I got off lightly." Seal's decision not to hide or remove his scars spoke volumes in an industry fixated on appearance. He stood tall, visibly different and truly authentic. Rather than fitting into the conventional image of a pop star, he completely shattered it, and fans admired him for it. Yet, even with public acceptance, his private battle with lupus quietly persisted. He had to adapt to living in constant negotiation with his body, learning to pace himself, heed warning signs, and protect his energy, even when the world demanded more than he could give. This health struggle affected more than just his body, it left a lasting emotional imprint. Growing up with a visible illness shaped the way Seal saw himself and the world. He knew rejection deeply, not just in love, but the kind that stems from being different and judged before ever speaking. That sense of alienation gave his music a rare emotional depth that set him apart. But lupus wasn't his only challenge. In addition to physical issues, Seal also faced mental health struggles. He has openly shared that he's lived with anxiety and panic attacks for decades. It all started unexpectedly during a studio session, when he experienced a severe panic attack so intense that he thought he was having a heart attack. He was rushed to the hospital, treated, and later diagnosed. Reflecting on the experience, Seal said, "It's given me such empathy and understanding for people who can't get help." He emphasized that there's no shame or guilt in seeking support, whether through therapy or a conversation with a friend. These struggles need to be shared. Beyond his health, Seal's personal life brought its own heartbreak, particularly in love and relationships. For a time, it looked like he had found his happily ever after. After years of personal and health battles, love finally entered his life in the form of Heidi Klum. Their meeting in the early 2000s felt cinematic. Heidi, a global supermodel and TV personality, and Seal, a music icon at the peak of his career, first met in a New York hotel lobby. That chance meeting soon evolved into a deep connection. Just 5 weeks after they met, they had their first date. At the time, Heidi was pregnant with her daughter Lenny from a previous relationship that had ended on a sour note. Rather than stepping away, Seal stepped in, supporting Heidi through her pregnancy and embracing Lenny as his own from the start. To Heidi, he became a steady presence and a safe haven. For Seal, Heidi embodied everything he had longed for: love, stability, and a sense of belonging. In an interview, Seal shared that he felt absolute clarity when they began dating, saying, "We didn't have time for the usual premarital dance that couples get into. For the first time in my life, I had total clarity in a relationship and I knew exactly what I had to do." The couple married in May 2005 on a beach in Mexico in a heartfelt, simple ceremony surrounded by loved ones. For Seal, it marked the beginning of a dream he once thought unreachable. They built a family quickly. Seal adopted Lenny, giving her his last name, and together they had 3 more children, sons Henry and Johan, and daughter Lou. Their home was lively and loud, and for Seal, who had grown up in foster care and chaos, it felt like a dream come true. He finally had the kind of family he had always imagined during the hardest times of his childhood. Their relationship wasn't just special to them, it was admired by the world. Every year, they renewed their vows in elaborate, loving ceremonies, sometimes with just close friends and other times in front of family. It became a cherished tradition. They once explained, "It's so special to us, something we love and something our children have gotten accustomed to. It's like, hey, mom and dad love each other and they get married every year." The public adored them. They seemed like the perfect couple, beautiful, successful, deeply in love. But behind the glamour, their relationship began to show cracks. At first, the issues were subtle and almost invisible, but over time, they became impossible to ignore. By 2012, the illusion of a perfect romance faded. Seal and Heidi surprised the world when they announced their separation, citing irreconcilable differences. In a joint statement, they said, "While we have enjoyed 7 very loving, loyal, and happy years of marriage, after much soul-searching, we have decided to separate." We've always had a deep respect for each other throughout our relationship and still love each other very much, but over time, we've grown apart. For fans, the news was shocking. How could a couple who appeared so in love, who renewed their vows with such commitment, and who built a beautiful family, fall apart? But for Seal, the pain cut much deeper than public reaction. This wasn't just the end of a marriage, it was the collapse of a life he had worked hard to create. Having grown up without a stable family, losing the one he had built felt like being dragged back into a darkness he believed he had escaped. Their divorce wasn't dramatic. There were no scandalous headlines or public fights. Instead, it unfolded with quiet sorrow, a kind of heartbreak that didn't make news but was deeply felt. In interviews following the split, Seal spoke respectfully. He admitted that love can change and that sometimes people grow apart even when they don't want to. But beneath his composed words, it was clear he wasn't just ending a relationship, he was mourning a loss. Heidi eventually revealed that their marriage wasn't perfect, though she chose not to share the details with the public. She explained, "People don't need to know who did what. I don't want to speak positively or negatively about our ups and downs. Every couple goes through things. Unfortunately, we're in the public eye, so our highs are out there, but I don't think the lows need to be printed in magazines, especially for the sake of our children." After the divorce, Seal's life became much more private. He didn't seek out another high-profile romance or flaunt a new partner. Instead, he turned his focus to what mattered most, his children. Fatherhood became his foundation. He shared custody with Heidi and stayed actively involved in his kids' lives, doing everything he could to stay close to them. He often spoke about how much being a father meant to him and how important it was to be a consistent presence, even as their family dynamic changed. Still, co-parenting came with its own challenges. There were whispers of conflict between Seal and Heidi over travel plans, custody agreements, and lifestyle differences. Seal, who had once treasured the idea of a close-knit family under one roof, now had to adjust to a more fragmented life, shared holidays, separate homes, and new routines. Heidi moved forward publicly, eventually marrying German musician Tom Kaulitz. Seal, on the other hand, kept his love life mostly private. He was said to be dating his former personal assistant, Laura Strayer, in 2021, but there were no new marriages or major announcements. It seemed Seal had retreated emotionally, preferring solitude to the risk of more heartache. The emotional cost of the divorce was evident. While he continued to make music and perform, something in him had changed. He became quieter and more cautious. The man who once sang love songs with passion now spoke with a guarded tone, often with a sadness just beneath the surface. His focus remained on his children, and he was frequently seen spending quality time with them, attending their games, going on trips, and creating memories. Even amid the complications of shared parenting, he made it clear that his children would always come first. But nothing could have truly prepared Seal for the lonely and painful path that followed the end of the family he had always dreamed of. Time passed, and so did the noise that once surrounded his name. There was a period when his voice filled arenas, fans cheered, and his songs played everywhere. But now, at 62, things are much quieter. In 2017, he released what became his final full album, Standards. Rather than new material, it featured classic songs from his youth, tunes about love, heartbreak, and hope, all themes he had always sung with deep feeling. Following Standards, he didn't rush to release new music. He didn't chase chart success or try to keep up with younger artists. Instead, he carefully chose a few performances and collaborations. The music industry had changed, TikTok stars were rising fast, and attention spans were shrinking. But Seal wasn't interested in playing that game. He made it clear he didn't care about streaming numbers or internet fame. Gradually, the spotlight dimmed, and he slipped into a quieter phase of life. At the same time, his health began to take a heavier toll. Seal had long lived with lupus, an autoimmune disease he was diagnosed with in his 20s. The scars on his face only hint at the true struggle: daily fatigue, joint pain, and inflammation. As he reached his 50s and 60s, the symptoms became harder to manage. Performing, once effortless, became physically draining. Long tours exhausted him, and recovery took longer. Even his rich, powerful voice needed more care. With age and illness, maintaining his vocal strength became a greater challenge. He had to be more cautious with his energy, unable to push through pain like he did when he was younger. For a man who once poured everything into his performances, slowing down wasn't just about physical limits, it was also emotional. It affected him emotionally as well. In a world that thrives on constant sharing, Seal took a different path. He grew quieter. He's rarely active on social media, seldom gives interviews, and avoids public stunts or attention-seeking comebacks. Instead, he chose a private life, focusing on music at his own deliberate and steady rhythm. But the reality is, walking away from fame isn't simple, especially for someone who once stood at its very core. Experiencing that level of success and then losing it can feel like losing a piece of yourself. Seal has spoken about how tough that transition was. When you've spent years being recognized everywhere, when your face, voice, and name meant something to millions, it's jarring to feel like the world has moved on. The fame that once opened every door gradually became a barrier to a normal life. The emotional toll was significant. Adding to that burden was his long-standing battle with anxiety, which pushed him further from the crowds and the public life he once embraced. Yet, he isn't resentful. He understands that the world evolves. Still, it's clear that at times he feels like someone from another era, a time when music was about emotion, not online metrics. For Seal, music has always been a form of healing, a way to express emotions too heavy to speak aloud. But when the stage lights go off and the rush of performing fades, those buried feelings surface more sharply. Even so, Seal remains cherished by fans who appreciate his journey and simply want him to be at peace. He continues to sing, not just because it's his profession, but because it's his lifeline, his way of making sense of his experiences. The world may no longer chant his name like before, but his voice still carries meaning. His life may be more subdued now, but in many ways, it holds even greater strength. Sometimes, the most powerful victories are the quiet ones. But what do you think? Should Seal return to the spotlight? Share your thoughts in the comments.